Welcome and thank you for coming to this presentation. As Murray mentioned, today will be all about looking at some of the tools we have available within the ArcGIS platform to really streamline your data collection workflows, and then to take that data collection and present the results of it in an engaging and effective way. So, did anyone, by the way, did anyone here catch the presentation this morning, Liz's great presentation on mapping tornadoes in Canada? Okay, great. Wasn't that fantastic? Yeah, I had no idea we even had tornadoes at all, so now we've got bears and tornadoes to worry about. So great. So first off, I just want to set the stage a little bit. So talk about how some of the software I'll be talking about today fits within the wider ArcGIS platform. And then we'll talk about Survey 123. So this is our form-centric solution for creating, analyzing, and sharing your surveys. And we'll get into some data visualizations with Operations Dashboard. I don't have many slides today, so pretty soon into this we'll be into a demo so we can see the software in action. And then hopefully we'll have some time for questions at the end. If we don't, or if you don't want to ask a question in the room here, by all means, I'll be milling about in the foyer. Just grab me, come say hi. I'd love to have a chat. Right, so you've probably seen some variation on this slide before. So this is showing some of the applications, not all of them, but some of the applications we have at our disposal as GIS professionals for that high-level data capture to visualization workflow within the ArcGIS platform. So for me, I think a common issue that our users face is that, you're all here probably because at some point, at the most basic level, you had to create maps for your job, right? So you have geospatial data, you need to manage that data, and then present the results of that in a map. So you've probably been doing that with something called ArcMap traditionally, hopefully ArcGIS Pro these days. And when you purchase ArcGIS Desktop, you just get a whole load of other things. So the challenge really is understanding how all these various applications fit together, what's the best tool for the job, how we can use them in conjunction with one another as part of a larger program of work. So that's really what today is all about. We'll be talking about using Survey 123 to capture data in a mobile device, capturing that into your web GIS. So ArcGIS Online is what I'll be showing today. It could just as well be ArcGIS Enterprise on your own infrastructure, and then presenting the results of that data capture using Operations Dashboard. Okay, so Survey 123, as I mentioned, that's our form-centric solution for creating, sharing, and analyzing surveys. I mentioned this form-centric, I'm emphasizing that because a very common question I get is, what is the difference between, or when should I use Survey 123 versus Collector? So are there sort of popular mobile data capture application? And it's a bit tricky because they really do serve the same end purpose. So they're all about capturing data directly into your web GIS. So I like to think about it in terms of the user experience. So if your users are comfortable or they're expecting a map interface, so maybe they're GIS folks or they're otherwise reasonably technical, then Collector is a great option. However, if you think about doing something like asset inspections, or maybe you're taking a previously paper-based workflow and digitizing it, then people are really going to expect to see that familiar form, and in which case Survey 123 would be the right tool for that. So we can author our surveys in two ways. We have two applications. So the Survey 123 web app, which we can launch from the Survey 123 website, which I'll speak about in a moment. Drag and drop builder. Really simple, really easy to use, and that's great for creating basic forms with your basic functionality. However, today I will be demonstrating Survey 123 Connect, so that's our fully featured desktop application with all kinds of great advanced functionality. Survey 123 Connect uses something called the XLS form standard. So that's an open standard which Esri have adopted, and it's really just about how we can create forms using a spreadsheet editor. So nominally that's Microsoft Excel, but it could be any application that can read XLS files. So as I mentioned, we can launch the web app, and also we have a one-stop shop for managing our surveys and doing some quick analysis in the Survey 123 website. We can author surveys in two ways. There's also two ways that we can respond to surveys. So we can use web forms, Survey123 web forms. So that's a really good option if you need to share your surveys publicly and allow anonymous users to respond to your survey. So it doesn't require an ArcGIS account. It doesn't require an identity. So really good for crowdsourcing and otherwise collecting data from the public. However, for most production workflows, you're probably going to want the Survey123 app. So that's a native application, runs on iOS, Android, Windows Mobile, and so you can get that in all of the major app stores. And the real advantage here is that allows you to work in a disconnected environment, capturing data, and then sync that back to your WebGIS when you're back in the office or back in service. And so I mentioned previously, Survey123 will work against both ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Enterprise. So no matter which platform you're using for your WebGIS, you can integrate that with Survey123. And this last point here is the one I really want to drive home. So whereas in a traditional sort of paper-based workflow, you've probably got some field workers or technicians, out in the field capturing data in their forms, going back to the office, entering that data into maybe Excel or Access, something like that. And then you've got another step probably to get that data into the GIS. So you're potentially tripling your efforts. So with Survey123, it's all about capturing that data directly into the GIS where it's available in real time in a feature service. So you can add it to your maps and perform analysis and do all kinds of other great things. Right, operations dashboard. So that is our out-of-the-box web application for creating and viewing dashboards. So again, really, really easy to use, no coding required. This was previously a desktop application, but for a while now it's been out as a web application, so you just access it in the browser, nice and lightweight. So dashboards are really all about just presenting those key metrics from your data in a single place, on a single screen, giving you that really nice high-level view of your data. That's really useful for stakeholders who maybe don't have the time or the will to go, perusing through maps and web applications and attribute tables and all that great stuff that we like. It's good for them. Gives you that common operational view of your data that we're always after. So again, operations dashboard included out of the box in ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Enterprise at version 10.6 or later. Of course, you're all on 10.71, so that's no problem at all. And in addition to maps, as you might expect, we have some other tools such as charts, gauges, lists. We can even embed content, so you could embed a web application into your dashboard if that suits your purposes. So all kinds of great tools. Right, so I said I didn't have many slides, so we'll start the demonstration now. When I was trying to come up with a subject for the demonstration today, I wanted to do something a little bit topical, a little bit different from our day jobs. So I had to think about some of the more memorable news stories over the past year here in Scotland. And one in particular, right around this time of year, is right after a conference last year actually, really grabbed my attention. So it all began when an intrepid dog walker in Ayrshire reported something unusual to police, prompting this public safety warning. And this is true, by the way. So, of course, straight away, all the major media outlets picked that up and ran with it, and we had true pandemonium briefly in the Ayrshire countryside in the west of Scotland. But, of course, not all the Scottish public are quite so easily convinced, and that trademark Scottish wit well and truly on display in the comments sections and on social media. Of course, my favorite thing to come out of this story was the inevitable parody Twitter account, Black Cat Faye Drongan. So I'm not sure if he did get that interview with the Daily Record after all or not. But just as quickly as it began, the next day it was all over with the BBC reporting that the animal in question was in fact nothing but a large domestic cat. So, you're probably thinking that's the end of that story. Well, maybe, but maybe not. So this is Scotland after all, right? So this is the land of the Loch Ness Monster, where the unicorn is the national animal. So I thought, this definitely warrants some further research. And lo and behold, depending on who you talk to and what you read, it seems to me like you may have a panther problem here in Scotland. So So our brief is clear. What we need to do is design a system for members of the public to be able to report big cat sightings. We're not going to limit it to panthers in this instance, and then take the results of that and present it in a dashboard so we have some actionable information for public safety and all that kinds of great stuff. So here I am in Survey123 Connect. As I mentioned before, you have two applications. You have the web app, but Survey123 Connect really for any of your more advanced functionality, you're going to want to use the desktop app here. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a new survey. We'll just give it a name. May have done a test or two before. Okay. And I'll just choose my advanced template and create my survey. So as you can see, because Excel is the default application on my machine associated with .xlsx files, it's launched Excel automatically here. So just draw your attention to my XLS form that's associated with the survey that I just created. So we have obviously a whole load of columns here. I really just wanted to speak about at first these first three columns, A, B, and C, so your type, name, and label columns. So these are your mandatory columns. So for each question in your survey, which is going to be a row in your spreadsheet, you must fill out the information for these three columns. So we'll just look at first the type column here. So this is just going to define the data type for each particular question. So that could be free text, it could be a number, multiple choice list. So in this case, I'm just going to select a note value. So a note is just as it sounds, it's just going to be a prompt for my users. It's in fact not an actual question. Here in the name column, so that's your, as you can see, database field name. So when I publish my survey, I'm going to get a hosted feature layer in my ArcGIS Online content, and this field just defines what's going to be the actual column names in that hosted feature layer. So as you can see there, you can't have any special characters or spaces or anything like that. And then the label field is going to be what my users will actually see. So ideally, you would have two screens when you're doing this, but you kind of want to line up Excel and Survey123 side by side. So I'm just going to enter a value here for the purpose of my survey. Okay, so I'll save that. And you'll see in a moment my changes propagated over to my Survey123 form preview. So that's really the basic workflow. You're making your changes in your spreadsheet editor and then seeing those changes propagated over to Survey123 Connect. So I'll just add another couple questions here, or sorry, yes, questions. So the first one will be of type date. And I'll also do one for a select one. So select one is how we can provide our end users with multiple choice lists. Okay, so we'll save that. And you should see in a moment that I will receive an error. So list name not in choices sheet. So just draw your attention here to the bottom of my worksheet. So we have some additional sheets here. On the choices sheet, this is where we define the choice list available to our select one questions. And so because I have an aversion to typing in front of people any more than is absolutely required, we'll just do a quick copy paste there. So the important thing to note here is my list name, so cat_species. Back in my survey sheet, what I need to do is replace the list name placeholder, including the square brackets, with my actual list name. And then when I save that, so when you have a select one question, you get this warning, kind of annoying, but you can just safely ignore that. And we should see in a moment my my nice pick list here. I can select from my list. So I'll just add another couple questions here. The next one will be of type geopoint. So that's how I can allow my users to capture a point location in the survey. And finally, I will do a question of type image. And so that as you probably imagine, just allows users to use their device's camera to take a photo or indeed upload an existing photo. Okay. So that's pretty much all of the pertinent information I need in this instance. But what I want to do now is just provide a little formatting, a little bit of advanced configuration that's just going to make life easier for my end users. So first of all, in my label field, I can just use HTML tags. So I'll just do some tags for bold, italics, and to center the text. So I can apply that directly to my label field, and we'll see that applied in the survey. Okay, another thing you probably want to do is a bit of sort of input validation, input restriction. So a nice way to do that is with our required field. So I'm going to set my first 3 questions to be mandatory or required. When you do so, you should provide your users with a descriptive required message so that if they're not able to submit their survey response, they can quickly understand why that was. So now you can see my required questions denoted with a red asterisk. If I try and submit a response without filling out one of those questions, I get a nice error message that, so some nice quick feedback that lets me know the error of my ways. Another thing that you want to do for your end users is you really only want them entering as little data as possible, really. So a nice way to do that where appropriate is to provide some default values. So here in my date field, or my date question, I'm going to enter the formula today, parentheses, in my default column, and that's just going to use my device's setting to automatically populate the date as being today. Another thing you may want to do is provide to restrict input using constraints. So if you want to restrict the allowable values that users can enter, you can use this constraint field. You can do things like take a previous answer and use that in your constraints and calculations and that kind of thing. But in this case, I just want to say, don't allow the user to enter a date that's in the future. So the syntax for doing so is a full stop. So that just represents the value that's coming in my survey. So in effect, we're saying the date of citing is going to be less than or equal to today's date. And again, just as with required, you want to provide a nice constraint message for your users. So you can see I've got my date populated by default, and if I try and submit with tomorrow's date, I get a nice descriptive error message. And so here in my species observed question, I'd say I've probably captured just about all the conceivable species of big cat that you could expect to find in Scotland, but you may have a situation whereby you need to provide a means for your users to select an option that's not in your pre-configured list. So the way that we do that is in the type column, you can just add the text or other. And then what that's going to do is going to add another option for other, and if I select that, it provides me with a free text box that I can enter any other value. Now my choice list here is looking good, but it's taking up quite a bit of real estate on my form. So now I just want to, over in my appearance column, I'm just going to set the appearance to be minimal, and that's just going to collapse everything down into a nice drop-down menu. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. I think I've got all the information I want. I've made life a little bit easier for my end users. So now, before we get to publishing, I just want to draw your attention to the remaining 2 sheets in my workbook here. So I'll start with the last one. So types. All this is all of the possible question types that you have access to in your XLS form, and then a description for what they are. So it just saves you going back and forth to the help pages. So it's really, really nice, useful. So this sheet does not actually affect the behavior of your survey. And then in the settings sheet here, you have a few options. All that's really important to me at this moment is my form title. I'm just going to change that. Right, so now finally I'm about ready to publish. So one thing to note is Survey123 Connect will write some files to disk in your user profile, and if you need to, say, insert some media into your survey, you can just put it here in this directory, so you can just quickly get to that location from the files link here in Survey123 Connect. The Schema Preview, so I mentioned before that when we publish, we get a hosted feature layer in your content. So this is just the schema definition of that resulting hosted feature layer for your survey responses. So the only thing to note here really is that when I added that or other, I actually get an additional field where I can record those values that aren't in my domain in effect for my select one question. And finally, we have some additional settings here. So, of course, we're GIS people, so we want to look at our map settings. Defaults to Melbourne, Australia, for whatever reason. So I'm just going to change that to be roughly here in Perth, and I can just apply some zoom level and all that kind of thing. If your users need to take maps offline, if they're going to be in a disconnected environment, you have some options for that. You can preload map packages and that kind of thing onto your device, and then you'll have access to the base maps offline. And you can actually take them offline in the app itself. And finally, then we have our style. So we just want to get away from some of those default values. This is where you can, of course, apply your organizational branding. I'm just going to choose some colors that will hopefully evoke pantherness in some way. And finally, in our general tab here, so we can just add a thumbnail. Don't want to say how long I worked on that in Paint. And finally, just a nice descriptive summary and description for our users. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. So we're now ready to publish here. So this warning really pertains to republishing. So you can imagine if you have a survey and people are out there submitting responses to it, and then you go add additional questions or remove questions. Obviously, you've changed the schema of your data, so it's just something to be aware of. If you've changed, say, the type of a particular question, you may kind of invalidate things. So it's really best to try and get your survey design as close as possible to how it's going to look before you go and publish your survey. But you can of course republish if you need to, and indeed create surveys from existing hosted feature layers. So you can retrofit existing data into a survey, which is really, really handy. So while that's going, right. So that's completed now. So I'm just going to go over to my phone. We don't have a switcher here today, unfortunately. Perfect. So here I am in the Survey123 field app running on my iPhone. The context menu in the top right of the application here. So again, it's very simple interface, easy to use. Just ensure that you're signed in to your portal or ArcGIS Online account. And then from the download surveys area here, I can see all of the surveys that are available to my ArcGIS Online user. So just go ahead and download the survey that I just created. So we download them to the device that allows you to work in that disconnected environment. So now I can go ahead and do some data collection. Panther. Yeah, happy enough here in Perth. And then I can use my camera. Sorry, this is rubbish. GIS consultant, not an artist. So we'll go ahead and submit that. So it gives me the option to save up all my responses and submit them at a later date if I was working offline. We've fortunately got great Wi-Fi here in the Perth Conference Center. So I'll go ahead and submit that now. Okay, so now here in the web browser, first of all, I'm going to go to the Survey 123 website. So as I mentioned before, it's a bit of a one-stop shopping for all of your published surveys, or surveys that are shared with your user. So my new survey is here. I'm going to click on Collaborate. So that's where we can set the sharing properties of our survey. So if you're used to ArcGIS Online or Portal for ArcGIS, you'll be familiar with the portal information model. So we have 3 levels that we can share things: publicly, with our organization, or with specific groups. So that's the most sort of granular way we can share things. With surveys, it's just the same. The only difference being that we can control sharing settings for who can submit responses to our survey, and then also who can view those survey responses. So here in both cases, I'm just going to share publicly. We'll save that. And then here in the Analyze tab, obviously I only have the one survey response that I just submitted, but if you did have a lot of data, there's some really good tools here to just get some quick analysis, charts, visualizations, that kind of thing. Again, so it's a nice place for maybe non-GIS users to go and get a nice quick view on the data. If that loads. Okay. So obviously not much there for us at the moment, but you can probably see how that could be useful. So now I'm going to go over to my ArcGIS Online subscription. So in the content area, we'll see Survey 123 has created some new things for us. So it's created a folder to place all of the items that it's created as part of the publishing process. So there you go, survey, and then the name of your survey. So we have a few different items here. We have an item for the form, so that's the survey form itself. And then we have two layer items, so 2 data items. You get a hosted feature layer, and then you get a view on that hosted feature layer. So that just allows you to, if you were so inclined, filter out certain fields or apply definition queries and all that kind of thing on your base table for what you might want to present to end users in a dashboard or something like that. And you just note that they're shared here publicly, shared with everyone, as I've configured in the Survey 123 website. So I'm now just going to add my hosted feature layer view to a new web map. And we'll just broadly zoom in here on Scotland. Get the Shetlands in there, of course. So I'm going to leave pretty much most things default here. I'm just going to choose a slightly more muted base map. I'll just rename my layer here. So for anyone who's worked with web applications in the ArcGIS platform before, you're probably quite familiar with a web map being kind of the building block of that application. So a dashboard's very similar, even though a map's not necessarily mandatory, but it's the best way for us to access our data and configure things in the dashboard moving forward. So as I said, I'm going to basically leave everything default here. But the one thing to note when you want to use web maps in your dashboard is to set the refresh interval. So I'm going to set that to be 0.1 minutes. So that translates to 6 seconds roughly. So that's the shortest possible refresh interval for my data. So it's going to query my hosted feature layer every 6 seconds, looking for new responses. So we'll just go ahead and save that. Add our tags, of course. And I'm finally just going to share that publicly as I shared the data. So now, from my home page, so I could have created a dashboard from the web map itself, but I'm just going to go back to the home page, and from the app launcher, we're just going to launch Operations Dashboard. So we'll create a new dashboard, of course give it a name. Okay, so we'll create. Okay, so here we are in Operations Dashboard. As I mentioned before, just a really nice builder interface, really easy to get up and running and get creating some dashboards. So first of all, just some overall settings for my dashboard. I'm going to use the dark theme and the same sort of text properties from my survey, just for a little consistency there. And I'll just go ahead and add the web map that I just created. So I'm going to accept most of the defaults here. I'm just going to inherit the web map extent from the web map itself. Okay, so here we are. We've got a nice map. A lot of GIS people will probably just stop here, but that's not what today's about. We did create some dashboards. So again, you want to think about what are the key metrics from your data. So for dashboards, I find less is more. Restraint is often a good idea. So for me, I just want to know, how many sightings do I have? What species are people recording? And where those sightings are occurring. So first thing I'm going to do is add an indicator. So that's just going to allow me to have some counts for my data. And we'll add a nice icon from our default icon. Next, I'm going to add a list. So that's just going to show me all of my survey responses as they come in. And so here, I can enter some free text, and I also have access to the fields in my data. And I'm going to add an action to zoom to the feature when somebody clicks on it. Okay, so we can just go ahead and drag and drop, just dock that over on the right-hand side. And finally, I'll add my, my chart. So we'll just choose our species observed. And yeah, we'll just leave everything else default. Dock that along the bottom. So as you can see, really, really quick, I've kind of got up and running with a usable dashboard. Obviously, there's some things I'd probably want to refine moving forward, but pretty easy to get up and running here. So I'm reasonably happy with that. So what I'll do now is just bring this out of edit mode into the finished product. Give that a quick refresh. And now, so I've got a great dashboard, or an okay dashboard. So now, obviously, I need some data. So here, I'm going to ask for a little bit of audience participation. If you would, please get out your phone and go to the following URL. And we'll see this thing in action. So that's arcg.is/1QQX0. So at your leisure, hopefully. Did everyone get that okay? No, okay, sorry. So hopefully, if we've done everything right, yeah, we're probably hammering that open Wi-Fi at the moment. That's fun. Because you. Oh, did I not save? Okay, try again if that. Okay. Yes, that's 1 lowercase q, capital X, 0. Okay, there we go. It worked. Excellent. First time for everything. Brilliant. So hopefully, it's obviously a bit of tongue-in-cheek subject matter, but hopefully that just gives you an idea about how you can use these tools available to you to create some interesting data collection and real-time dashboard. That's really good. Those are streaming in. Wonderful. So I only have a couple more minutes, but I just someone's a joker. Okay, we just have just a couple more minutes, but I just want to cover something else really quickly because it's a really good bit of functionality, really useful. So, and that's how we integrate webhooks with Survey 123. So I won't go into detail about really what a webhook is, but it's basically we're just listening for an event and then using that to trigger talking to another application over HTTP. So I'm in a program called Integromat here. There's something else called Microsoft Flow, which you may have used. I tend to demo Integromat just because it has a free tier. So it's good for if you want to go and have a play. So handily, we have some templates created by Esri that we can already make use of. So if I just search for Survey 123 in my templates area, I have this nice thing here. So send an email when a survey is submitted. So you're probably seeing how that could be of some use. So I'll just go ahead and create a new scenario from my template. And I just need to add a webhook. So that's as simple as just giving it a name and just associating it with a particular survey. So I have my big cat survey here. I'm going to say add data, so the trigger event will be when a new survey response is submitted. Okay. And then in my Office 365 module, I can just fill in some information here. So in the subject line, like you can see, I have all of the information from my survey. So I have my attributes. I also have metadata about who I am as a survey responder. So I can go ahead and in my attributes here, get some dynamic information. Okay, so in the body, I can use that to link to my dashboard. Okay, so let's paste that in there. Just one or two more things I need to configure. So I'll just set the importance to high, add myself as the recipient. As you can see, you could even populate this with dynamic information from your survey. Okay. So I'm going to run my scenario once. So it'll be either whoever gets there first, it's only going to run the one time, or I'll submit something myself. Okay, so it looks like we've got something here. And there we go. So as you can see, a really useful tool and easy to use way to bring other applications into play with your surveys. Right, so there concludes this afternoon's presentation. Thank you very much for listening, everyone. And again, if you have some questions, feel free to come have a chat outside. Thanks very much. Enjoy the rest.